Sometimes I look back at my life and wonder when I stopped living for myself. Maybe it was when Samuel, my only son, nassau and filled every commodo of our tiny house with noise, curiosity, and precious need. Or perhaps it was years before, when I first lost my father and learned how a woman's heart can adapt to sustenta others, no matter how much it bleeds in silencio. My name is Irene. I'm 64 years old, and until Faz Puco, every freckle, every door in my costas, and every rachadura in my hands told the story of a mulher who gave everything for her familia. People around here know me as the lady at the pharmacy because I spent 27 annos filling prescriptions during the dia and washing clients' uniforms at night. I once dreamed of estudar to be a nurse, but that was left in the past, abandonado when Samuel was born, and Albert, meu marido, lost another job, blaming the government, the vizinhos, everything, menos his own bitterness, the first sacrifice. I left the university after just one semester, selling my textbooks for enough money to buy diapers and arroz. Some nights, the dorm room window would flood my dreams, the echo of students' laughter feeling like a promise broken by necessity. The second, when Samuel started school, Albert was already frequent at the bar, so I took evening shifts in a laundromat, coming home with fingers numbed from bleach and the scent of sabon stuck under my nails. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. The third, I nursed my Mai through her illness for 6 years, moving her into our home. Every penny went to her remedios, appointments, special alimentos. She barely ate. I hardly saw friends. Convite after convite, I declined until they stopped arriving. I told myself this was normal. Mulher serves. I repeated it like oração. If I felt cansada, I'd remind myself of Samuel's sorriso, or Albert's rare word of gratitude, though it usually came after I stitched his camisa or filled his glass. Needing affection, descanso, or even basic kindness, I buried those desires. No dia a dia, I became an object, busy, útil, almost invisible. My anniversary presents were handfuls of wildflowers plucked from a roadside. Once, years atrás, Albert gave me a cheap silver necklace. He never noticed when I stopped wearing it. Finances were always tight. As Samuel reached adolescence, his shoes wore out faster than I could buy Paris Novos. The car was velho and noisy, and the house shrunk around us with every bill overlooked. Mofo in the bathroom, peeling paint in the kitchen, windows that shook at the slightest vento. After paying for Samuel's college entrance courses, I divided my salary with trembling hands to make it fit. I gave up even small luxuries, new clothes, cafe with friends, only secondhand, only necessary. I tucked away coins in a coffee jar, dreaming of a future sabbatico that never came. People in the barrow sometimes complimented me for my forza. "How you do it all, Donna Irene," they'd say. "So devoted, so generous. You're an example." But they didn't know the resto. They couldn't feel how small I'd become. Just a mai empregada, not a woman. They saw what they wanted, a good, resilient matriarch. But inside I felt paper thin, weighed down by everything I carried but never named. Samuel, as a boy, would run to me with sketches and messy hands. But as a teenager, his voice turned frio, his eyes sliding past me like a stranger in the supermarket. Sometimes, alone at night, I'd drift back to when I was 16. A Saturday morning, my pai teaching me to ride a bike on a dirt road. His hands steady, warm, promise in his laughter. In that memory, I am fearless. Then, another, par mai recente. My mother's whisper in the hospital bed, the last Christmas. "You've always been braver than me." I wanted to believe her, but I felt nothing but a quiet ache. Our house shows everything I never said. The corridor, lined with faded pictures of Samuel in every phase, but none of Mim. The living room, crowded with their souvenirs, broken toys, and bags of laundry, with the armchair I've claimed for myself as a haven. My routine is written in the marks on the kitchen table, the chipped mugs, the mountain of remedios by my bedside. Samuel's quarto is always closed, private. Sometimes I pause at the door, hand half raised, then let it fall without knocking. The pharmacy where trabalho is no brighter. I'm invisible behind my white coat, friendly, reliable. My life is a script. Say bom dia, find the prescription, smile politely, return home. I answer every pedido, at work, at home, because I don't know another way. If anyone wonders what I want, they don't ask. If I do, I don't answer. That's who I became. Someone who's good at desaparecer. Someone who makes space for everyone, until there is none left for herself. The community hall buzzed with noise, full of laughter and bouncing balloons. The stale sweetness of leftover cake mixing with the metallic scent of reheated sausage rolls. I moved around the tables, carrying unopened soda bottles under my arm, squeezing past tight clusters of people. The walls, which I decorated at dawn with the same old banners, now seemed to close in every time I walked by, as if even they were tired of seeing my hands busy. It was my daughter's birthday party, but everyone seemed to treat it like any gathering. Loud, careless, hands passing plates of food, faces flushed with the warmth of too many bodies in one space. As I set out the last tray of sandwiches, my son-in-law waved me off impatiently, barely glancing up from his loud group. "You missed a spot here," he called from the sofa, flicking a crumb onto the floor with a dismissive grin. I didn't respond, just bent down and brushed it away. My back twinged as I stood. I forced my smile back into place and pretended not to mind. My daughter walked through the crowd wearing a bright sash we'd bought together last week, laughing with friends from work. "My, pega mais copos," she said, eyes flicking over the guests without meeting mine directly. Her tone was sharp, and I flinched inside but said nothing. I slipped into the kitchen and stacked more cups, fingers slippery with condensation. The music thudded in my chest, making it hard to think. Voices overlapped. Guests shouted over each other. The sticky floor pulled at my shoes with every step. Small children spilled soda, and I found myself on hands and knees, scrubbing at the mess before anyone could step in it. My knees hurt against the linoleum. I heard my granddaughter giggle from behind the couch, as if I were a character in a play. "Vovo's always cleaning up messes," she chirped, her friend nodding and whispering something with a shrug. Near the gifts, I tried to fade into the periphery, but the requests kept coming. "Do we have toothpicks? Where's the ice? Can you get more napkins?" Each demand pinged at me, louder and sharper. I moved mechanically, catching only fragments of their conversations. Plans for trips I wasn't invited to. Inside jokes I didn't understand. The room was bursting with color and sound, but I felt washed out. An old photograph tucked behind new ones. My cardigan sleeves were sticky. My hands shook when I emptied another garbage bag. I caught sight of myself in the mirrored windows, hair coming loose, jaw clenched, shoulders rounded toward my chest. My heart thumped, a nervous flutter. A lull in the crowd, and my brother-in-law announced, "Time for family photos!" Glasses clinked and people surged to the table draped in balloons. My daughter waved everyone over, her new family huddled together, arms intertwined. I waited, clutching a tray of empty glasses, expecting to be called too. But as they smiled for the camera, my daughter shot me a brief, distracted look. "Don't forget to put the leftovers away, Mai. Se não estraga," she murmured as she turned back, teeth flashing in photos. Click. The picture snapped, sealing the moment forever without me in it. The laughter that followed was sharp, bright, a sound knife-edged with something I don't know how to name. My stomach cramped. I tried to steady the glasses, but one slipped out of my hand, clattering to the floor and rolling out of reach. Silence for half a second. Then my son-in-law's friend called. "That's why we use plastic ones, right?" Laughter erupted around him. I stood there, frozen for a breath before crouching, slow, my joints protesting, and picking up the runaway glass. As I knelt, I heard snatches of conversation floating above. "She's always so devoted. It's almost funny how long she fusses over everything. I guess she likes it." Heat crept up my neck as I fumbled with the glass, my breath shaky and thin. I felt them all watch, then lose interest, returning to their plates, oblivious. One kind-faced neighbor wandered over and said quietly, "You all right, Donna Lucia?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. She patted my arm, her touch gentle, eyes full of an empathy that made my throat ache, and went back to her own family. That was the final straw, the small indignity layered atop every other. Not the spilled glass, not the forgotten invitation to the picture, but the way my daughter's look slid off me like I was a stain on the tablecloth, not worth scrubbing out. I finished packing leftovers, grease soaking through the paper towels in my hands. My body was heavy, limbs awkward. head buzzing with things I wished I could say but never would. In the burst of applause as the candles were blown out, I hovered near the doorway, utterly apart from my own family's joy. I watched my reflection in the dark glass once more, a silent outline moving among the living, present, necessary, and utterly unseen. The hall was packed, every corner crowded with faces I had. The walk home is slower this time. Every step aches, almost like my feet have doubled in peso. I clutch my bolsa to my chest, case pressing through the thin fabric. My body sente o frio, almost como se o evento de antes estivesse grudado na minha pele. Impossível de tirar mesmo esfregando forte. A rua está cheia de vida. Vendedores gritam, crianças brincam, cheiro de pão fresco escapa de uma padaria. Tudo isso parece muito distante de mim. Eu estou no piloto automático. Na esquina da farmácia, eu paro. Penso em ligar para minha filha. Um instinto automático. Me apegar à velha rotina de explicar cada coisa, de pedir desculpas até quando não tenho culpa. Mas não pego o telefone. Em vez disso, fecho os olhos. Eu respiro e vejo cada cena de hoje rodando como um filme. O olhar de desprezo do meu marido, minha filha rindo do meu vestido simples, as pessoas que desviaram de mim no salão. É um tipo de dor nova, afiada, mas também esclarecedora. Pela primeira vez, percebo que passei anos esperando que notassem quem eu era, esperando gratidão por todos os sacrifícios, engolidos com silêncio. Quantas vezes ouvi, você é a base da casa. E mesmo assim, fui tratada como peça de decoração, imutável e invisível. Meus pensamentos explodem numa conversa interna barulhenta. Você não é uma empregada. Você não é só serviço. Você está viva. O meu coração bate rápido. As mãos soam. Lembro quando deixei de viajar para cuidar da sogra enferma. Do curso de enfermagem que deixei para trás, porque meu marido disse que ficaria difícil para a família. Da promessa de voltar a pintar, engolida pela rotina das lancheiras e reuniões de colégio. Tudo volta, mas dessa vez com uma luz dura, como facho de farol na cara. Eu abro a bolsa e pego as chaves. Encosto nelas, frias, metálicas. Elas sempre foram símbolo de casa, segurança, mas agora parecem uma corrente. Um lembrete do quanto minha vida ficou pequena. Olho para elas e penso, até hoje aceitei tudo porque parecia mais fácil continuar do que romper. Mas hoje, alguma coisa mudou. Eu não sei se foi o sorriso torto da minha filha, o silêncio do meu marido enquanto lavava as mãos e ignorava minha presença, ou o cheiro de carne queimada, sinal do quanto estavam ocupados para notar que tudo eu segurava sozinha. Ando depressa até uma praça cheia de árvores. Me sento em um banco de cimento. Um cachorro brinca ali perto, arrastando folhas secas com o focinho. Penso nas noites em que chorei no banheiro, baixinho, para não acordar ninguém. Se até agora só existi para os outros, quem sou para mim? Essa pergunta pesa, mas traz um tipo estranho de leveza, como se tirasse uma pedra enorme da bolsa, por breve momento. Agora vejo 2 episódios do passado de outro jeito. Uma vez, quando raspei minhas economias para ajudar minha filha a pagar a faculdade, ela nem olhou para trás quando recebeu o diploma. Só largou a beca no meu colo e foi comemorar com os amigos. No aniversário de 20 anos de casada, preparei uma surpresa, mas José esqueceu e só trouxe pão de queijo e falou, tá bom assim. Na hora, engoli a decepção. Hoje vejo, não foi descuido, foi costume. A decisão chega quase como um impulso, mas não é raiva descontrolada. Eu nunca mais vou aceitar ficar invisível. Sussurro para as próprias mãos, quase querendo ouvir a palavra ecoar. Não sei ainda como agir, mas percebo que não é preciso um grande gesto. Basta um primeiro passo, minúsculo, quase invisível. Só que para mim já é abismo de diferença. Levanto do banco devagar, caminho pelas calçadas que conheço de cor. Os cheiros da cidade agora batem de outra forma. Não são só lembranças de trajetos entre supermercado e casa, mas promessas de outros lugares possíveis. O céu começa a escurecer, e cada sombra me lembra que, mesmo quando não me veem, eu existo. Quando chego em casa, passo a chave na porta como sempre, mas o gesto carrega outro sentido. Empurro a porta devagar, sentindo um frio na espinha. Hoje alguma coisa rompeu. Ponho a bolsa no chão, sento na beira da cama, olho para o armário cheio de roupas que não escolhi para mim, nem queria. Respiro fundo. Meu corpo treme, mas sinto fogo começando no fundo do peito. É dor, é perda, mas é também um início. Hoje não vou contar a ninguém, mas eu sei, lá dentro, alguma coisa mudou para sempre. The city had barely begun to wake when I abri os olhos, earlier than usual. The grayish light slipped in through the curtains and fell directly over my old slippers, the soul almost gone. I felt an unfamiliar quietude, a softness in my chest, but also a certainty. I lay there breathing, feeling the weight of years pressing down, but losing a little força, a cada inspiração. For so long my mornings were dictated by lists. What to fazer, comprar, resolver, lembrar para outros. That day, I stopped. Instead, I sat at the table, in the stillness, and wrote, at first someone else's name, depois, outro, e mais outro, one for each person to whom I had ceded pedaços da minha vida. A meticulous, almost ritualistic inventory. Bills paid from overtime, errands run at the cost of my lunch, hospital vigils, favors regados com ingratidão. Página após página, meu caderno só aumentava. In the kitchen, the faded tiles reflected a particular shade of tiredness. I had noticed them so many times, but never their cracks, their looseness. It was as if the apartment itself felt the tremor of what I was prestes a phaser. I didn't wash anyone's clothes that day, didn't pick up the bathroom towels spread by Cynthia. Felipe came in sleepy, said, "Tempo?" I pointed. My hands rested on the table. I didn't move to toast the bread, not even to open the plastic bag. Just watched him, noticed the unease in his eyes. Something was different. Composed, I spent the rest of the morning scanning old folders, collecting the envelopes with all the comprovantes, pagos nos últimos meses. I took my small stash of money from the back of my closet. That envelope I guarded so closely, for emergencies nobody ever thought about. Just me. I put it all in a blue folder. All bills, all receipts, a list of everything I'd paid, and a note. Hoje não estarei em casa à noite. Reflitam sobre o que isso significa. Cuidem uns dos outros. I didn't ask. I didn't justify. Cynthia called during lunch. Mãe, pega minha encomenda ali rapidinho, por favor. Não dá pra ir agora. Before I'd have rushed out, made her life easy at any cost. That day I just answered. Hoje não posso, she insisted. Cynthia, hoje não. By early afternoon I was ready. I packed a small suitcase, chose 3 pieces of clothing, none of them with stains or loose buttons, and put them inside, along with a worn book of poetry and my oldest, most reliable bread recipes, things from me, for me. I put the suitcase down by the door, paused a moment to look at the faded family portrait above the sofa, and for once, I didn't feel small or indebted to their smiles. I gathered courage like someone collecting breadcrumbs, vagarosamente, prestando atenção. I took my house keys off the main ring and left them on the entryway table. I kept the one key for my own room and the storage room at the sewing club I never joined. Now, I would. Leaving home, the corridor seemed brighter, as if it had shed a layer of dust that had always clouded my vision. The smell of someone else's lunch filtered through, the smell of burnt garlic and rice almost comforting, like company for a new journey. At the bus stop, people looked through me as always, but I stood a little taller. I entered the bus, holding my small suitcase between my knees. The world outside the window was unchanged, but I felt every building, store, and tree with a fresh intensity, as if they too existed beyond the routines I had obeyed for decades. At the sewing club, a community space I'd secretly wished to join for years, my fingers trembled only for a second as I entered. I sat by a machine, ignoring curious looks, and took out a scrap of fabric. Each stitch I made was silent protest, turned into something vaguely beautiful. The familiarity of the needle, the rhythmic whir of the machine, the gentle hum of conversation around me. None of that belonged to my old life, yet felt more like home than anywhere else had for years. Nobody there knew my family, or what I owed anyone. I was just another woman, hands busy, focused on a seam. The silence between us was soothing. A small patch of peace grew inside me with each completed row. I left late in the afternoon, cheeks warmed by brief, gentle goodbyes. No explanations. Até amanhã, they said, and it sounded like a promise. At the market, I bought pão francês by the unit, not counting coins for others, not worrying about dinner leftovers. A quiet victory, almost silly, made my heart ache in a different way. During the day, I received 4 calls, 3 from Cynthia, 1 from Felipe. I didn't answer any of them. My phone buzzed in my bag. I muted it for the first time in years. I found a simple pension, walls painted fresh yellow, sheets neatly tucked, paid the daily rate from my own envelope. The small window looked out onto nothing special, but the air inside was light, almost hopeful. I texted only one person, a friend from work, Beatrice, just to say I was safe. Night came without drama. I placed my suitcase at the foot of the bed, sat cross-legged with a piece of bread and a strong coffee, listening to the city wind down outside. The small room held the scent of laundry soap and new beginnings. There was fear, a thin, familiar shadow. My heart fluttered when I thought about what they would think, if they would cry or scream, or dismiss me altogether. But each breath, each moment of sitting with myself, clear, unafraid, untethered, helped stanch the panic before it could grow again. Sleep came quietly, not weighed down by anything but the comfort of the space I built for myself. In the silent rhythm of my new single room, I was no longer defined by the needs of others, and for the very first time in decades, I was truly, undeniably me. The next few days, my phone doesn't stop buzzing. At first, I silence it, watching the screen light up with Marco's name, then Anna's, then my own mother's. Every call goes unanswered. The messages pile up, long, angry paragraphs, then sudden bursts of accusations, descending finally into wounded silence when I don't respond. Marco tries first. The texts start polite. Where did you put the documents? Are you coming to help Coma Mama? Then shift to panic. What's going on with you? Why are you acting like this? And quickly, to guilt. 30 years married and é assim que você age? After 2 days, Anna appears at my door without warning. I watch her through the peephole, her fist lazy against the wood, her voice muffled, but louder than I've ever heard. I hesitate before opening. When I do, she bursts in, more affronted than concerned. Por que você não responde? Todo mundo está falando já. Papai está uma pilha. A avó acha que você enlouqueceu. O que foi dessa vez? I stand with my arms crossed and say nothing. For the first time, I realize how silence can also be power. She paces my living room, casting glances at the empty suitcase by the sofa. Não entendo você. Sempre foi você pra todo mundo. Agora some assim. Ignora todo mundo. Egoísta. Pensei que fosse diferente. There is a long pause. Anna waits for me to fill the space, to explain myself, to step back into the role I'd always played. But this silence thickens, oppressive, and I hold it between us like a wall. She finally storms out, calling over her shoulder. Fica aí então sozinha. Later, Marco tries voicemail. His voice is strained, a calculated mix of concern and accusation. Isabela, isso não é justo. Você não responde, ninguém sabe se você está bem. Precisa crescer, parar de agir como uma criança birrenta. Resolve logo isso. He calls again and again, until I block his number. Still, new paths for their words find me. An old neighbor knocks on my door to say, Marco was asking about me. Anna's friends send messages on Facebook. My sister hints in the family group chat that a mãe precisa de você mais do que nunca. The pressure clamps around my chest like old hands. Their words are familiar, winding through my mind, mingling menace with longing. What if they need me? Maybe estoy exagerando. Maybe I'm really being cruel. On the 3rd day, I wake with a start. Thick sunlight strokes the floorboards beside my mattress. My first time sleeping alone in the middle of the apartment, without the fading scent of Marco's cologne, without Anna's bag, abandoned on the sofa. The space is both immense and suffocating. I make coffee and take it to the balcony, ignored for years. Downstairs, the city pulses, horns and children's laughter drifting upward, disconnected from my isolation. I scroll through the messages again, hands trembling, stomach tight. You always put yourself last. But ninguém aguenta alguém tão ingrato. My mother has written. Só pode estar com algum problema na cabeça. It stings. I bite my lip and stare at the cracked tiles under my feet. Doubt creeps in. If everyone thinks I'm the problem, maybe it's true. Desperate to anchor myself, I begin sorting old papers. I find invoices, hospital receipts from my mother's illness, worn notes annotated in my precise handwriting. All Small reminders of how far I've gone to please, to smooth ruffled edges, to protect. The pattern snaps into focus. Every absent holiday, every rearranged shift, every time I tasted bitterness but smiled anyway. Not one of them ever truly invested in my well-being. The doorbell rings. My sister Claudia steps in. She sits gingerly, arms crossed, discomfort written on her face. They're worried, you know. Dizem que você está magoando todo mundo. Ana chorou ontem. Marco quase não come. Por que fazer isso agora? For a moment, I almost want to explain everything. How exhaustion has hollowed me. How I've lost track of who I am. But the words don't come. Claudia's face hardens. Maybe you should ask forgiveness, she says softly, the final arrow in their quiver. She leaves, and I'm left with the echo of her words bouncing inside my head. I feel myself teetering, but don't collapse. Instead, I do something small, almost defiant. I change the locks. The click of metal is shockingly loud in the empty apartment. With each turn, something inside me loosens. A boundary, finally set. From then on, the silence becomes easier. Each day is a struggle, but every moment I hold my ground is a minor victory. I eat at the table carefully set for one. I walk alone in the evening, letting the air bite my skin. Anna tries again by email, this time a wall of capitalized pleas and slurs. I read, don't reply. Marco's mother calls, voice syrupy sweet, pretending concern. Let's sit and talk, querida. Esclarecer as coisas. No, I find my own rhythm, reordering my days without the noise of their demands. I plant a small flower in a mug by my kitchen window, just for me. When loneliness stabs, I let it, feeling the old ache but not running to fill it with duty. Their anger grows brittle, threats of legal action, wild tales shared within the family. Claudia messages once more, accusing me of letting everyone down, of squandering decades of sacrifice. You'll regret this. No one will be there for you. I almost respond, but stop myself, breathing deeply. The panic fades. I realize they are no longer speaking to me, only to the version of me who existed for them. I tuck Anna's last message into a drawer, look at my reflection in the kitchen window, and see a flicker of steadiness. For the first time in years, I belong to myself. The world outside buzzes and howls, but there is quiet inside these walls. I am not finished. I am starting. My hands trembled as I reached for the wooden box, buried in the bottom drawer of the wardrobe. I hadn't opened it in years. It was covered in dust, the metal clasp rusted and stubborn, as if resisting the truth it guarded. All around me, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet, even for an afternoon so heavy and gray. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, louder than the distant humming of traffic. Something was about to break. I knew it in my bones. Pulling the box into my lap, I sat on the edge of the bed, legs numb and leaden. The familiar smell of old perfume and paper filled my nostrils. As soon as the lid gave way, my fingers brushed aside faded receipts and a yellowing handkerchief until they landed on a stack of letters. Dozens of envelopes carefully bundled together with a sky-blue ribbon. I didn't remember tying that ribbon. I didn't even remember saving most of these letters. Yet, I could see my handwriting on some, the curves shaky from exhaustion, and others in the elegant, practiced loops of my late mother. One envelope, heavier than the rest, bore the name of my husband, Antonio, in quick, careless strokes. I stared at it, cold spreading from my stomach to my chest. All those years ago, I'd found this letter in the pocket of his winter coat, stuffed past grocery lists and faded train tickets. He'd dismissed it, said it was nothing, laughed at my worry, but I never threw it away. I broke the seal with deliberate slowness. The paper had yellowed and the ink had bled, but I could still make out the words. A letter not to me, but about me. A letter from my mother to Antonio, written 2 decades earlier. My eyes swept across lines that twisted into daggers. Don't let her have dreams, Antonio. She always needed someone to hold her down. If you let go, she'll ruin everything. Keep her busy at home, it's for her own good. Reading, the air in the room felt thinner. I was suddenly back in my childhood kitchen, my mother at the stove, telling me how the world could never love a woman who wanted too much. People don't like women who shine, she'd said with a tired certainty, crushing every spark in me with a gentle, practiced hand. That memory, always tinged with guilt, now pulsed with hot betrayal. It had been arranged. My smallness, my lack, had been orchestrated by the two people whose love defined my life. A sob nearly escaped, but I swallowed it, refusing to let the past steal anything else from me. In that moment, sadness eclipsed anger. My life, measured in self-denial and invisible achievements, had not been accidental. It was a plan, agreed upon between mother and husband, to keep me rooted, to keep the family stable, at the expense of my own becoming. Not an accident, but a conspiracy of love, warped into control. The world outside the window was still gray, but something inside me, some rigid core, shifted. I understood why Antonio had always encouraged the children to blame me for their disappointments, for their limitations. Why my mother had always sighed, "You're lucky, dear. Not every woman gets such a stable life." It wasn't fate or bad luck. They'd made me the anchor so they could drift, free. Hands shaking, I shuffled through the other letters. A birthday card I never received. Notes of plans and calculations, even invoices Antonio had hidden from me. I felt my own face tightening, not with defeat, but purpose. This secret, a plan hatched and lived out over decades, no longer trapped me. Now, it clarified everything. I found myself standing, clutching the letter. I pressed it to my chest, as if hoping the paper itself would burn a hole through my sternum and let the light in. My eyes fell on the tarnished mirror in the corner, the one I had avoided for months. I stared, not looking away this time. My reflection was gaunt, older than yesterday, but my eyes were clear. For the first time in ages, I saw not a victim, but a woman finally knowing the shape of her own story. Sitting at the dining table, I spread out the letters, sorting years of secrets into small piles. I wasn't sure what I'd do with them yet. There was a pressure behind my eyes, as if tears were building, ready to spill, but I held them back. "Not now," I whispered. There would be time for mourning, but first, action. In the solitude, I remembered a time when I wanted to move to another city for a job that would let me write. I had let that dream go so easily, thinking it was simply my duty. Now, I saw that every no from my mother, every belittling laugh from Antonio, was not protection, but limitation wrapped in the pale ribbons of concern. I thought of my children, how they watched and learned that love meant sacrifice. Someone always shrinking so others could expand. I went to the window and opened it wide, letting the afternoon chill bite at my face. For a moment, I just stood there, inhaling, letting the air fill me. There was something sharp and alive in it. The city's noises felt less intrusive, more like proof that life was still happening, that possibilities continued just beyond my closed doors. I gathered the letters back into the box, this time arranging them with care, not as burdens, but as relics of a version of myself I no longer would protect. I would not confront Antonio or my mother tonight. I wasn't ready, not yet. For now, I'd carry this truth with me, not as shame, but as a lantern, lighting the edges of a new path. By the time dusk had crept into the room, I realized I wasn't afraid. I was tired, yes, but in a new, almost exhilarating way, the kind of fatigue that comes after an unexpected mercy. No illusions shielded me now, only facts, a roadmap out of the dark. With a shaky but determined sigh, I made my choice. I would not stay quiet. I would not carry their secret so their world could remain at peace and mine in pieces. The next step belonged to me. For the first time, truly, the next step was entirely mine. I waited until the sky was heavy with clouds before leaving the house that morning. My hands trembled, but there was no fear left, just una especie de electricidade, a surging calm that pulled me forward. I walked the cracked sidewalk past the old market, past the yellowed posters, the smell of wet pavement soaking into my shoes. Each step felt like letting go of a weight I had carried for decades. When I turned the last corner, my heart hammered. A warning or a push, I didn't know. He was there, in the same living room, surrounded by frames of family, trophies that gleamed with victories never mine. He looked older, more fragile than I remembered, but his eyes darted with the same impatience. The room was too bright, the curtains thrown open. Dust danced in stubborn rays. I drew a deep breath, tasting something metallic, and entered. My feet left faint prints on the thin carpet. He was reading the paper, pretending he hadn't heard me open the door. "You came," he said, voice flat. "Yes," I replied. My own voice sounded sharper than I intended. He didn't look up right away. "I suppose you want to talk about what you think you found." I didn't answer immediately. The envelope in my bag, the brittle papers inside, had grown heavier with every hour since my discovery. I let them rest there. "I came to talk about the years I lost," he snorted. "You lost yourself. That's not my fault." I moved closer, my heels making a dull tap against the floor. "You let me believe I was chosen, that I was needed. The truth is I was convenient, disposable." He bristled, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. "Is this about money? About the house?" I did what I could. Everyone has to make sacrifices. No one forced you. You lied, for years, about the house, about the debts, even about her. You let me give up everything for nothing. He looked at me finally, eyes hard, lips drawn thin. "You think you're the only one who suffered here. I carried the weight too." "But you never carried me," I replied. "You stood on me." My voice grew steadier as I spoke. A pause settled. He opened and closed his hands. "This is bitterness. You're poisoning yourself." "No," I said, voice cold and clean. "Bitterness is what kept me awake every night while you slept beside me, pretending not to hear my crying." He slammed the paper on the coffee table. "You want me to beg? To apologize for every minor mistake?" His face flushed. "You women are never satisfied." I let the silence grow, punching through the room like a storm. "I want nothing from you. Not your house, not your apologies, not even your anger." My chest rose and fell, a measured, deliberate breath. "I want my life back." He stood up abruptly, knocking a mug to the carpet. "You can't just leave. Things don't work like that." I looked down at the coffee stains spreading on the floor. "They do. Starting now." I pulled the envelope from my bag and tossed it onto the table. The pages spilled. Old letters, receipts, the proof of lies. He stared at them, hands balled at his sides. "You found that little box, didn't you? That's all ancient history. It's worthless. Those papers won't help you." "Maybe not, but now I know who you are. Now I see you without the stories." He tried to gather the papers, his hands unsteady. "You don't know the whole picture. You never did. You never let me," I replied, softer but unwavering. "But I can see it now, even if it's ugly." A flicker of something passed in his face. Fear? Or just the knowledge that I would not come back? "You'll regret this," he said, voice thin as paper. "People regret burning bridges." I lifted my head, letting the space between us fill with the sound of my own certainty. "It's not a bridge if I was never allowed to cross." I picked up my bag. "Goodbye." There was no tremor, no need for a final glance over my shoulder. He tried one last time, softer, almost pleading. "You really won't give me another chance?" I shook my head. "You had all the chances. I just never had one." I left the room. Each step felt like rising through water, light returning to my lungs. I heard him call my name once, then nothing, just the heartbeat of my own freedom in my ears. When I reached the door, I turned for a moment, feeling the wind outside brush against my skin, fresh and sharp. I stepped across the threshold, closing the past behind me, the sound of the lock clicking loud and final. A seal not just on a house, but on a lifetime surrendered and now claimed back, piece by piece. I did not look back. I did not need to. The future waited with the weight of possibility. A space finally, blessedly, my own. The next morning I opened every window of my small apartment, letting in a rush of air so different from the one that had lingered for years. Musty, stagnant, heavy with the weight of old promises. Now the breeze brought the faint scent of cut grass and coffee from the cafe below. I wandered barefoot across the wooden floor. Warm sunlight spilled onto my toes, tracing new lines where hesitation had once gathered like dust. The kitchen gleamed, not because it was new, but because, for the first time, it felt like it belonged to me. I moved through morning rituals with an attention that was almost reverent. Boiling water, listening to its low rumble, grinding coffee beans, marveling at how sharp their aroma filled the room. There was no one demanding when breakfast would be ready, no voice calling from another room with needs more urgent than my own. I sat at the table, alone but not lonely, and cradled the mug in both hands. Sarah called at 9 a.m., her name glowing on my phone with a quiet steadiness. She'd always been nothing more than a friendly neighbor before, but now her voice landed gently in the center of my chest. "Hey, how are you today?" she asked, tone sincere, nothing forced. "I'm good," I said, feeling the truth of it as I spoke. Really good. A pause, filled with soft static. Want to help me pick out some flowers for my balcony later? She offered. And it didn't feel like a favor or a rescue. Just two lives intersecting, evenly matched. I accepted. I wanted to say yes, not because I owed anything, but because the space between us felt light and promising. After the call, I went to the bedroom, opening the old chest at the foot of my bed. I sorted its contents with care. Some things I kept. A faded photograph of my mother laughing on a summer day. A book with my margin notes. A little blue scarf I'd bought once just for myself and never worn. Other things. Gifts I'd never wanted. Mementos from a life lived for others. I placed in a cardboard box by the door, ready to be donated. With each item shifted, I felt my shoulders drop, my breathing slow, the house filling with more of me than before. Around noon, I watered the plants on my windowsill, cheap violets and this spindly geranium that I'd rescued from clear neglect. I hummed a tune, not caring how off-key I was. For lunch, I made a salad bursting with color. Tomatoes, bright orange carrots, a crisp apple, things I liked but had never bothered to buy, just for me. The first bite was tart and alive. The afternoon brought laughter from the street, a group of children chasing a ball. I watched through the open window, sipped more coffee, and sketched quietly at the table, lines turning into shapes, then into something I recognized as possible. Later, when Sarah arrived for our flower excursion, she greeted me with a smile full of simple recognition. We walked to the street market, the sounds of the city fresh, vendors calling, a cyclist passing, music from a distant window. This time I felt the pulse of it in my own rhythm. I picked yellow marigolds and deep purple petunias, colors I would have once thought too bold. Back home, we arranged them together on my balcony. The sun dipped, casting everything in a gold haze. I could see my reflection faintly in the window glass. Hair mussed, eyes steady and unguarded. I smiled at myself, surprised at the ease of it. Sarah said, "Your place looks different, brighter." I nodded, touching the petal of a marigold. I think it feels that way too. Evening settled softly. I lit a single candle on the table. No special reason, just because I wanted to. The flame wavered gently in the breeze, casting shadows that spun around new corners. I didn't look back at the closed bedroom door, at what I'd boxed up, or at the silence that had once pressed down on each night. Instead, I watched the way the light moved and thought of tomorrow, of waking up with the sun again, of hearing my own voice in this space I'd finally claimed. I have walked through fire, and out the other side. This life, undemanding and fully mine, is the proof. From this day forward, I choose myself.